So this will be our introduction to the strength chapter here, and we're going to talk about this from a rehabilitation standpoint. A lot of the concepts we talk about do cross over into the normal strength training and conditioning, exercise physiology concepts, but we're talking about it from a standpoint of, when we have an injury, say we have an injury to a joint, a lot of times the rehabilitation focuses on strengthening muscles around that joint to make sure it stays stable. Obviously, if we have a muscle injury itself, right, we want to strengthen that muscle. We're going to use our Wolfson Davis's law to align our scar tissue and make sure it can do that, and then build the muscle around it so it can regain the strength and function that it was able to do. So, from a rehab standpoint, I'm going to introduce a couple little concepts that you've probably been exposed to before. Definition wise, you should have an idea of what, strength is, what endurance is. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Power, it's the rate at which it occurs, but it's a speed component. So we want to, when we're working on power, we want to make sure that we're really emphasizing the speed component. So then we go into the basic concepts or the basic types of contractions. I'm sure you've heard these before, but I'm going to go over them real quick and really apply them to our setting, our rehabilitation setting. So yes, this isometric contraction, we're not moving, we're just the muscle length is static, the joint range of motion is static. Most people kind of overlook this because it's really not functional. I mean, how many times do you just sit in a 90-90 position and watch life go by? You really don't. So there's a couple times where isometric contractions can really be helpful, and we can start working on some basic balance and some basic strengthening in getting in certain positions. Or it may be in a situation like this guy right here. Looks like a pretty fit dude, probably doesn't need to do isometric wall sits, but if we're looking at a patellar tendon issue that we don't want them to flex deeper than 45 degrees, we may want to, this is a way that we can kind of gain that stability of that patellofemoral joint without, causing further damage in the cartilage and other things that we do. You can also, you add in some other things. We're challenging this patient here to abduct and working on the abductors. Gluteus medius is the abductor that, kind of working on that to make sure that as the person walks or squats or lands from a jump, that's another one, that the legs don't go in, right? We want to keep them out. I know that's a simple concept, but it's easy when we have weak abductors to have that go in, and that causes some other issues. And then this person here doing the opposite. We're doing adduction, so we're squeezing that ball while she does the wall sit. And really engaging not only the adductors but the medial quadriceps, which have a big role in controlling the patella. So again, if we have some patella thing. The final thing the picture that I put on here is we can put people in vulnerable positions. And so if this is an overhead person that we know is going to be in a specific position over and over, and we know that position is very unstable, and so we want those muscles at that position to be strong, then we can put them in this position in a controlled environment, nice rehabilitation controlled, and then we can strengthen those muscles isometrically to develop strength in specific positions. So the angle specific, it does create metabolic change, it does create strength, right? But it's specific to the actual angle. So there is some function. The biggest area of that is your core exercises. When a lot of your abdominal muscles aren't really built to function in a moving or very short movements, very, very tiny range of motion changes. And so most of the core and abdominal exercises are just static contractions. And then this person might move their legs or arms or, have a ball or do some other things, but we're contracting those abdominal muscles statically. So this is their function to do that. So isometrically, we need to train in that way. A lot of people have seen if you've had a knee injury or you've been around rehab that of people who have knee injuries, you're going to see these quad sets. Just it's a good easy one to have early in their rehabilitation before they can start doing a whole bunch of stuff. It's great to get that quadricep activated again, kind of overcome some of that neural inhibition that has occurred from the surgery, from the injury, those kind of things, and then to get again right here. We want to in this extended position, we want to get some quadricep control and stability in that one position. So it's very useful at the early part. A lot of times if you've done quad sets, or if you've been around people doing quad sets, they're told to hold it for 5 seconds and then relax, because that's the amount of time that it needs. So there's my isometric pitch. We go on to the moving contractions now, and you've probably seen this. Isometric or isotonic contractions have two phases: the shortening and the lengthening phase, concentric, eccentric. Yes, my little picture is moving, so don't freak out. I'll get that off there. Oh, this is my my workout buddy. No, but ultimately what I need you to know on these are the concentric is that shortening position or shortening of the muscle, and that eccentric is the lengthening of the muscle. So obviously on our biceps curl, when we come up and curl the biceps is concentrically contracting, and then as he lowers it down nice and slowly, it's the lengthening or eccentric. So I will want you to know basic, because you'll need to know how to exercise or how to give or prescribe. That's a better way to say it. Prescribe exercises for in the concentric or eccentric pattern. And so when we talk about this is a classic bench press, right? And so we're looking at the pectoralis major. The function of that is to adduct the arm. So this arm's going to come over here as he pushes up. This arm goes closer to the body, so it adducts. And so as he pushes up, here, that's a shortening of the muscle, and then he lowers it down slowly, and it's going to go. That's the eccentric portion of that. And so make sure that you have an idea. I'll give you a couple of examples here. The classic plyometric jumps, right, man? Those are just a blast. But if we talk about knee extension from the quadriceps, right? So this is as the person jumps up in the air, that knee is extended. That's our concentric phase. And then this as the person lands, and we have that now the quadricep stretches out. And don't tell me the quadricep isn't working when you land softly, because man, that causes that burn even more. But that deceleration, that lengthening out is the eccentric portion of that. One final example is the anterior tibialis. I might have done this in class, but again, this is as we dorsiflex the foot. Anterior tibialis is right here. It's going to contract, bring the foot up. That's the concentric portion. And then as this guy lowers his foot to the ground, and provides some stability as it goes down, that's my eccentric portion. It's a lengthening as it lowers the foot back down to the ground. So I'll want you to not only identify concentric, eccentric portions, but then also tell me that also prescribe. I'm gonna, that's part of your practical is I'm gonna give you a specific muscle action and actually ask you to give me a concentric or eccentric contraction about that. The other thing that I want to make sure that you note, and I'm gonna kind of dive into eccentric a little bit more, but this concentric is the acceleration. This is where we get our acceleration type function. So this is our quicker contractions, and then the eccentric contractions are our deceleration. That's coming up because I'm going to dive into eccentric. And why would I dive into eccentric? Can't even say it. I'm getting so excited. Why is eccentric contractions my favorite? And yes, they are my favorite. So I do play favorites on contractions. Don't worry about that page number. The eccentric contractions are very, very helpful and very, very effective in rehabilitation. There's a number of different reasons why. You'll see, I'll have them listed here. But ultimately, so if we talk about a quadricep again, right? This quadricep push, this leg press that he presses out when he extends it, that's the concentric contraction. But then now as he lowers that thing down, the quadriceps here are lengthening, and they're still contracting because he's lowering it slowly down. And so as he does that, this right here, the concentric, a lot of times you'll see is told or is written as a more efficient form of a contraction, because you can do more with less motor units. And so you have less of the muscle producing a lot more tension, a lot more force to resist some of that kind of stuff. So as he comes down, and sometimes you'll see the single leg, or they'll push it up with both legs and then lower it down with one is a way sometimes that can do it. The other things that we can have, yes, a little bit more resistant to fatigue. I don't know if you've ever experienced that. I experience the opposite. I get tired when I do that. But this is where I want to point out here. This is on eccentric contraction. There's two things. I'm going to talk about deceleration, but the tension is going to be the biggest thing. Tension, and I'll talk about a little bit more of this in class. Tension gives us stability. It has a big role in our neuromuscular control, or basically our dynamic stability, our moving stability that we have in our muscles. So we want tension in our muscles to be stable, and eccentric contractions are really good at generating tension. And we can do these usually because of this fact, because we're not using as much of the muscle. A lot of times we can do this earlier in a rehabilitation process. That's an important one. You can do it earlier in the rehabilitation because we're not using as much of the muscle, and so it's sometimes we can get away with exercising a muscle or strengthening a muscle before we could actually do a full-on put some weight on a concentric eccentric kind of progression that we're used to. So tension's important. The other important part is that deceleration, that lengthening contraction, and overhead athlete pictures are the best because we accelerate this arm, all this anterior stuff, all these anterior muscles, accelerate that arm extremely fast. Your angular velocity is so fast to generate the speed, the power that we want. And as soon as we release the ball, as soon as we hit the ball, then the posterior muscles, now their job is to decelerate the arm, and so we don't have as much injury. And so if you think about, I didn't give you the picture of it, but you think about all those muscles on the back that attach to your shoulder blade, your scapula. All those muscles are like holding a rope going, whoa, big fella. And they're trying to slow that arm down so it doesn't just pull, now it's not going to pull off them, but so it doesn't put that shoulder in a bad position or push that shoulder forward or those kind of things. And so the deceleration, if we have a muscle that is functionally, their job is to decelerate, and they go through that a lot, then we'll want to, that's a reason why we would start to go, okay, we want to focus on eccentrics with this person. All right, the general stuff that we talk about on strengthening stuff, you might have seen these before. Ultimately, that progressively overloading the muscle, and we can talk a little bit more about that in class. The other thing that I wanted to introduce at least a little bit, because ultimately, so far, what I've been building towards is we need to match our exercise with the type of function that we want to do. So if we have a muscle that's going to eccentrically contract, we want to do a bunch of eccentric activities and that kind of stuff. If we have a muscle that does endurance, we want to do a bunch of endurance stuff. And so the same thing comes, and that kind of brings us into the different muscle fiber types. I'm guessing some of you have had this, some of you may not have. I'll talk a little bit more about this in class, but there's different types of muscle fibers, and you can see there's the type 1 is that endurance type muscle we want to match to. The slow oxidative means it's going to use oxygen as its main source of energy. It typically is resistant to fatigue, but we have to have that consistent supply of oxygen, and your core, you're not going to get a lot of power, right? We don't need a lot of power for that. As we apply this to exercise and rehabilitation, these are going to be muscles now. This is the rotator cuff muscles. We're doing these rotator cuff exercises. Or I'll put in some ankle exercises. These are muscles that don't produce a lot of power, but we want them to be stable for long periods of time. And so we're going to do much more of a endurance type, low resistance, high repetition type activity. Balance is another good one on the ankle that we set. We want to be balanced, and we need to be balanced for long periods of time. And so we'll just challenge that to get endurance in those muscles to do these small little contractions that don't produce a lot of power. On the strength and power side, right, we have the fast twitch fibers. We have two different types. I say fast glycolytic. That is a reference to the process of breaking down glucose, because that's what it uses for energy, and we've got to have that glucose coming in. We don't need oxygen. That process of breaking down glucose happens quick, but it doesn't happen for very long, right? So, but we do get our forceful, our strength, and our power contractions come from our type 2Bs. And then there is a type 2A that has properties of both, and that's why you see this fast oxidative / glycolytic, and so that just references or indicates that the power source or the energy source can come from oxygen if you have it. If you don't, it can break down the glucose and get its energy that way. And you can see how it's basically, it's kind of the combination, it's the combo meal of the between the type 1 and the pure type 2A of the type 2B, sorry, of the fast twitch type stuff. And so this is what we get. I will go over, and so basically, as we start to look at what muscles that we're needing to rehabilitate, needing to build strength back into, or needing to support functionally, we just need to match that, right? So if we have muscles that or a person that needs to function in a speed power, then we need to do speed power activities. This is not super rocket science. I'll talk a little bit more about this in class, because I'm getting to my time that I didn't want to get too far. So I'll go over some of these things. I gave you some examples of some of the speed power, and this is some of the activities that you'll see, and then we apply that to rehab. And so that's the whole point of my discussion in our class is now we're going to match the function of the muscle with our rehabilitative activities. All right, I went too long. So this is longer than I wanted to go, but I get, you know me, I get excited. So we'll touch base on that last part in class, and I'll see you, and we'll continue.